How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to Football for Fun. I am Daniel, and today we are going to be revealing, or I will be revealing, my top 32 NFL quarterbacks. Well, I'm going to be revealing the bottom half, and the reason I do top 32, well, there are 32 NFL teams, so theoretically, everyone on this list is going to be worthy to start. Now, obviously, there are going to be some low-end starters who maybe we deem as backups or whatnot, but we have 32 slots, so we're going to fill them all. And before I start, I do want to kind of give some criteria, just kind of make sure that the tone is set essentially. So I'm going to be ranking these based on quarterbacks I would want going into the 2025 to 2026 NFL season. So, and this is for the whole season. This is not who I would want for a game or a drive or a throw or anything like that. This is also not really considering the future or years into the future. This isn't top quarterbacks I would build around or anything like that. This is just right here, right now. I'm a coach, I'm a GM, it's the off season, and I have a blank slate. Who do I want as my quarterback? Just kind of ranking them. Given that I would need them around, health does factor in. So there might be some guys who would normally be ranked higher, but because they're a little bit more injury prone, I would have them a little bit lower because ultimately I need you to play games, right? Trying not to take into consideration scheme and things like that. So there might be some quarterbacks like Sam Darnold or Brock Purdy, for instance, who look better on some certain schemes. I'm trying not to take that into consideration, but again, it can be really hard to tell. Just people if Sam Darnold was on a different scheme, how's he going to do? And I think we'll actually kind of see that this season, how he does on the Seahawks. Theoretically, everyone on this list is worthy to start, even if it's just barely. So with that out of the way, let's go to my number 32 quarterback, and I'll talk about snubs towards the end, kind of keep you in suspense. At number 32, barely worthy to start, but still worthy in my opinion, Joe Flacco. Now, I think a lot of people might think that Joe Flacco, that this is actually a little bit low for him, that maybe he's closer to 2025, something like that. I think a lot of people really appreciate his run in Cleveland 2 years ago, where he led them to the playoffs and played really well in that stretch. But, which is kind of going to be my philosophy for a lot of these other quarterbacks coming up, age is simply not on Joe Flacco's side. Joe Flacco is 40, and he's been playing well. He's a good placeholder. He's a good backup, when you need him to come in. He's the type of quarterback on individual game basis. I might rather have him than a lot of the others that are ahead of him for the yearly thing, the year basis. But I have Joe Flacco as the 32nd best quarterback. I think ideally in this league, he's just a backup, and he's just one of the best backups in the league. But as he said, to the reporters asking if he should mentor Shedeur Sanders, not even mentioning Dylan Gabriel, he is not in Cleveland to be a mentor. He is here to compete for the starting job. All right, so at number 31, I've got Russell Wilson. Very similar to Joe Flacco in that he's just getting a little older, and he just wasn't really all that good in Pittsburgh. He had his sort of Denver stretch where he wasn't all that good, and just since his last good year in Seattle, which I think was 21 or 22. 22 was the Bronco year, and 21 he wasn't all that good. So in 2020 was really the last time he was good, and it's kind of fallen off since. Now, maybe he's a little better than 31. I'm not exactly sure, but if I'm a coach GM and I need a quarterback to build my team around, I don't really want Russell Wilson. Maybe part of it's the personality. I'm not really sure. But I have Russell Wilson at 31. I think he's on the Giants. Yeah, because on the Steelers, he did okay, which, might be another quarterback we talk about in this video who's on a certain team and might do well anyway, but he did okay statistically on the Steelers, but it just kind of dried out, and I wasn't really all that impressed from what I watched. So I think this season, he's getting older. Russell Wilson I have at 31. At number 30, I have Jackson Dart. Honestly, I don't really know much about him. We'll kind of see. What he's about. Ironically, same team as the number 31 quarterback, but seems decent. I really have nothing to say. I don't even remember what the draft sort of analysis and stuff like that were It's just with rookies, you never know. Like, they could be Jaden Daniels or CJ Stroud, like in the top 10, 15, or they could just be complete busts and, like, Backupville, in like 2 years. So you never really know. At 29, I've got Justin Fields. Justin Fields was someone I initially actually had out of the list. And then I was like, well, he was in a bad situation in Chicago. And then he showed some flashes in Pittsburgh. If I'm a coach GM, I might rather him than like Joe Flacco or Russell Wilson because he's still relatively young. He can run, which I think is very helpful. And I think if he were in a really good system, then he could kind of thrive. He might be a potential candidate for kind of that former bust, quarterback to sort of kind of rejuvenate his career like you saw with Baker Mayfield, Sam Darnold, Geno Smith, things like that. I feel like Justin Fields could be a candidate for that sort of distinction. Number 28, I have Kirk Cousins. I still think Kirk Cousins just barely, kind of like the other veteran guys, is still kind of like a starting caliber quarterback. It's just that for some reason the Falcons they signed Kirk Cousins and drafted Penix at 8 or 10 or whatever it was, and he's probably at this point going to be a backup. Now that Aaron Rodgers signed with the Steelers, like, I don't really know. Like, is he just going to stick it out with Atlanta and just be the backup? Is he going to try to make things weird and demand a trade? I mean, if he were to get traded, I feel like it would either be a team that injures their starters. It's like any of the top teams that like their star gets injured. Like if God forbid Josh Allen or Joe Burrow or CJ Stroud got hurt, then like it might make sense to trade for Kirk Cousins. But right here, right now, I'd say maybe only the Saints would make sense. And that's in their division. So, it's very unlikely to happen. I mean, maybe Atlanta thinks that Kirk Cousins sucks. They're like, sure, we'll trade you to the Saints. And then, he can crap the bed there, right? But I think Kirk Cousins, obviously, he might be considered washed at this point. I think he's lost a lot of luster. I do think people forget that he did play some good games in Atlanta. Not Atlanta. Well, yes, Atlanta. Most notably that game against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers that went overtime and that, like, undrafted rookie receiver, whatever, had his career day and things like that. So he's had good games like that, but I think for now, he's just barely a starter. I think the reason I don't have him as a backup is because last year, he was kind of coming off a torn Achilles, so this year he's not coming off injury. So theoretically, if he might have another good year. I mean, he could still be like a top 20 quarterback for all we know, but given that he was benched, I don't think that's the case. Number 27, I have JJ McCarthy. JJ is kind of like the other rookies to where I just know nothing about him. I think he's been kind of, criticized for well, not that's really his fault, but he's kind of been docked points in the context that in Michigan, he was just handing the ball a lot to like Blake Corum and things like that. And so we don't really know how good he is. Now, I do think Minnesota drafting it at 10, that's not nothing. I mean, if the front office really believes in him like that, then that's got to count for something, right? And essentially, for these purposes, I'm kind of treating JJ McCarthy as a rookie. Just like Jackson Dart, who's, below him, and another, rookie who's ahead of him. You could probably guess who at this point. I guess you could say it's concerning that he missed the whole season last year. I don't know if he had an injury problem in Michigan, but I wouldn't even go to consider J.J. McCarthy injury prone necessarily. But I also thought it was interesting. I saw some article that was like, I posted in the Discord. It was like, Minnesota Vikings should trade for Kirk Cousins. Like, why would you do that? Just, there was the whole Rodgers stuff. Like, just stick with your rookie. Just, you drafted J.J. McCarthy 10. Like, why are you suddenly having kind of cold feet about it? So, for now, I have J.J. McCarthy at 27, but he could be better. He could be worse. At 26, I have Cam Ward. I mean, number one overall pick. I guess it is kind of interesting that, like, lately, a lot of these quarterbacks that have been drafted high, like, CJ Stroud and Jaden Daniels, they've been performing pretty well. So if I really wanted to project, I could have put him at, like, 19 or 18 and just predicted that he's really good. But, Cam Ward, I have no idea, about him, what he's going to do in the NFL. And I don't really take the scheme and stuff into consideration. But if we're to talk about, like, projecting, I think Tennessee is a little bit of a tough place to thrive. He doesn't really have very many guys to throw to. I guess defense is all right, and theoretically, I don't really know about the coach, so we'll kind of see on that end. But for now, I have Cam Ward at 26. At 25, I have Drake May. I think Drake May might actually also fall into the category similar to how we see the rookies, which is that we don't know much about him. Now, obviously, he's not a rookie, and we've seen him play. I've heard good things about him. I've also heard that he's a little overrated, so I'm not exactly sure what to make of it. I don't think he had the greatest support system in New England, and I do think if he had, more weapons around him and things like that, then he could do, really well. He literally has no one. He has Kendrick Bourne. I mean, now he has Stephon Diggs, which obviously, that's another topic. But, I mean, last year what I'm saying is, Kendrick Bourne and, I don't know, Tyquan Thornton, for all I know. He didn't really have very many people to, throw to and things like that. So it'll be interesting to see if he can step it up or if he's just kind of, a Mac Jones 2.0. At 24, I have Michael Penix. Again, I guess this is a lot of guys. I don't really know much about Michael Penix. I feel like the couple times I watched him, he was pretty decent. I thought he threw the ball pretty well and things like that. And I mean, he was drafted 8th overall, so you can make fun of the Falcons for signing Kirk Cousins, then drafting Penix, but there's a chance he was going to go that high or similarly anyway. So not really much I can say. I think he's probably going to be a solid starting quarterback. So we'll see how that goes. At 23, I have Bryce Young. A certain co-host might rather me put him higher. I do think it was very impressive how he ended the season in Carolina. And I do remember watching these Panthers games. He was playing really well. I think it was the game against the Eagles. He was just flinging the ball and things like that. At the same time, that same season, he got benched. He didn't get hurt. He didn't nothing controversial happened. He got benched. So I probably needed to see another full year of Bryce Young. Even if his team doesn't go to the playoffs, if they go 7-10, but Bryce Young plays a top 10, 15-ish quarterback, then I would be comfortable moving him out of the top 20. Well, into the top 20, if that makes sense. That is exactly what I meant to say. But if he plays poorly again, I wouldn't be uncomfortable necessarily putting him outside the top 20. So we'll see. 22, we have Trevor Lawrence. I do think Trevor is someone who could still be really good in this league. And honestly, if I were to think about, he also came to mind. If I were to think about candidates for quarterbacks who were former busts or considered former busts, but now, could be rejuvenate their career under new coaching and things like that. I think Trevor Lawrence is a name I would watch because Liam Cohen basically resurrected Bryce Young's career, and I think Baker Mayfield's career. Is that how it worked? He was the OC in Carolina, right? Was he also the OC in Tampa Bay? There's some trend that I always mention, which is where basically Baker Mayfield and Bryce Young were former number 1 overall picks that got basically they were seen as busts, but then they got good coaching and they're now considered good again. And I think Trevor Lawrence could be a candidate to sort of rejuvenate his career and see himself back in the top 15, 10, things like that. So, I mean, he just hasn't shown me enough to prove he sucks. I still think he's really solid. I don't know. But anyway, at number 21, I have Caleb Williams. Not the greatest season, but I think, he's kind of shown the flashes. I think if he can just he has a really good coach coming, which again, I'm not trying to consider the coaching, but Ben Johnson could, show us that Caleb Williams is worthy to be top 15, top 10. So, I think, very intriguing overall, obviously. Not much more to be said. I mean, it is very possible that Caleb Williams is going to be the first Bears quarterback ever, I think, right, to pass for over 4,000 yards. So, very intriguing. And a lot of these guys, at 20, 21, 25, they're all, swing guys. They're not really set there. I do think people like Russell Wilson and Joe Flacco and Kirk Cousins are going to stay where they are, if not regress. Whereas the guys like Caleb Williams, Bryce Young, Michael Penix, Drake May, JJ McCarthy, Cam Ward, things like that. Any of them could go from like the 20s to like top 10 or like top 15 or something like that. So that will remain to be seen. At number 21, oh yeah, sorry, I did already do Caleb Williams. At number 20, I have Kyler Murray. I think Kyler Murray, unlike the other guys I was mentioning, I think we kind of know what he is, which is that he's really talented and he can play well, but he's probably like a top between 22 to like 18 quarterback. Like, he's not among the elite guys. He's not really even in that second tier of like, you know, just like good quarterbacks. He's just kind of there. I feel like his you know, cap is like, you know, maybe number 13 or something like that. You know, and I honestly think if he had broken out, he would have done it already. So I'm not really sure what to make of Kyler Murray, but you know, 20 solid starter. I mean, you know, just a lot of these teams would be you know, would kill to have Kyler Murray as their starting quarterback, right? And 19, I have Tua Tagovailoa. Now, this might be kind of the first. Well, I'm not going to claim it's the first controversial one because I'm sure there are like others that are going to be considered controversial as well. But Tua is someone that I think based on playing abilities alone, he's probably way better. He's probably closer to top 15, maybe even top 10 based on playing ability alone. But given that he's oftentimes getting concussed and is very injury prone and things like that, Tua is someone that, you know, I wouldn't mind having because of the playing ability. But if I'm worried every other week about when he's going to get concussed, then I just have to like dock points for him. So he's someone I initially had lower, but then I saw his stats and he's like, he plays way better than that. So I just put him at 19. And number 18, I have Geno Smith. I think Geno Smith, his kind of peak has passed. I mean, obviously he was seen as a bust. He's kind of the consummate example of like, he was seen as a bust. He was a backup for several years, and then he just rejuvenated his career. Like, I think he's the ultimate example. And I think in his kind of glory days in like, 22, 23, essentially, he was probably like top 15 to 12 at his absolute peak. But I think, you know, he's also not really getting any younger. He's not insanely old. I think he's like 35, I want to say 30. So he's not 40, but I do think we've probably seen the best of Geno. And, you know, I think 18 is fair, which again is a solid starter, but, you know, there are 17 guys I would probably take ahead of him. And then to round out the bottom half of the starters, Aaron Rodgers. I have Aaron Rodgers as the 17th best quarterback, which might seem controversial to some, but I also think most people would probably agree. I think, you know, I mean, the league has really passed Aaron Rodgers. I mean, obviously everyone like Josh Allen, Mahomes are like better than him. And then, you know, as we'll talk about in the next video, there might be some of the other guys. You start to realize, well, would I rather have Aaron Rodgers for a season or like this guy? I think I'd rather have this guy, you know, that guy. But so I think Aaron Rodgers is still a solid quarterback. Like I think this season he's going to be very solid under Mike Tomlin and the Steelers. I mean, he can still throw it. He has good decision making and things like that. But he's obviously older. He got injured, you know, 2 years ago, and you know he's not going to be able to like move around as he like once did. So. You know, I think the Steelers, they got themselves like a basically middling quarterback, which I'm pretty sure I mentioned in the like sort of reaction video, and which I think is fine. I think honestly, this is the best that they've had, you know, since Roethlisberger, basically. I mean, I don't know if we've ever considered Kenny Pickett top 17. Maybe like in his rookie season, he was good, considered good. I'm talking about guys who were snubbed. We'll go into that in a second, but you know, certainly not Russell Wilson or Justin Fields and like, you know, Mason Rudolph and things like that. So. Even though this might seem like an indictment on Aaron Rodgers, I do think if Rodgers plays like the 17th best quarterback, then the Steelers are going to be successful in the regular season. Like 9, 10, 11 wins successful. And probably lose a playoff game. They could win one. You never know. All right, so that rounds out my top 32 NFL quarterbacks. You know, just leave your criticisms in the comments. I do want to go over some snubs real quick. Kind of dishonorable mentions because, you know, they suck. Well, and there are some guys, honestly, Andy Dalton kind of fits that category, but I just include him there because, go Panthers, right? But there's some guys like Andy Dalton, Marcus Mariota, Case Keenum, to where it's like they might be on the fringe of like top 32, but they're just backups. So I didn't necessarily include them because it's like no one really considers Case Keenum, like, or, what's Taylor Heineke doing these days? I think he's the starter or the backup in Los Angeles Chargers, if I'm not correct. But anyway, these are just a few guys I wanted to kind of talk about. Anthony Richardson and Daniel Jones, for that matter, I think both just absolutely suck. And honestly, I almost had Daniel Jones at number 32, but then I was like, I looked at other options. I may or may not have consulted with my co-host, and we were both kind of like, yeah, I think Justin Fields is a little bit better. So for the record, I do have Daniel Jones above Anthony Richardson because I think Anthony Richardson can't hit a boat from water, right? Or hit water from a boat, I think is the kind of saying. But, Anthony Richardson, I think, stinks. Jameis Winston, he's always fun, but he also has like an interception problem, and his numbers aren't really the greatest necessarily on a consistent basis. Kenny Pickett, I have no idea. He was a former first-round pick, and he's had a good win-loss record in Pittsburgh. I guess so is Mason Rudolph, but I just don't know like what his deal is. Like, I guess he wasn't that good enough. And then, yeah, Daniel Jones we just talked about. So anyway, that rounds out my, my bottom half of the league, as far as quarterbacks go. Please put in the comments what you think. Even if you want to troll or criticize, I am always open for that. Also, we do have a Discord I would love for you to join if you want to sort of banter about football. And with that said, I will see you for the next video. Peace.